this morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kelly Wall. I know that we see each other around campus often. You're probably like, who's that lady? What does she do? Yeah. So I'm the Director of Development and Advancement here, meaning I raise all the money, the marketing, do a little bit of government affairs, fight with public officials on your behalf. So that's pretty much what I do here. But what I also do is to bring resources in for you that can help you, right? Because sobriety includes all different kinds of things, you know. But the lady I'm about to introduce to you, I'm very proud to say, is also a personal friend of mine. But Rose DeRoia is here today. Rose is the president and founder of the Tommy DeRoia Success Foundation. So if you've gone through our detox or central intake recently and you walk in and you know we've named because of their financial support for Stella Maris, they give us a lot of money every year for that's passed on directly to the programs and services for you all. So our central intake is named after them. But Rose's nonprofit, the Tommy DeRoia Success Foundation, raises awareness and funds for the disease. That's it then, last person. We'll just privately shame the next person who comes in late. But the Tommy DeRoia Success Foundation's mission is to provide education, support, and advocacy to change public misconception about the disease of addiction and to empower individuals on their journey to recovery through collective efforts. All right? She was already here. She doesn't know. Rose and her board strive to create a compassionate, inclusive society that understands and supports those affected by the disease. Now let me tell you about this fantastic lady who's a rock star. Rosie's a licensed pharmacist. Since 2016, she's continually refined her approach to engaging individuals in recovery, their families, lawmakers, and broader communities. And basically what that means is she started doing a little bit of this and everyone realized what a rock star she was and how amazing she was. So everyone's like, you've got to meet Rose. You've got to meet Rose. We've got to bring Rosie in. We've got to bring Rosie in. Rose presents at schools, universities, courtrooms. She has a podcast, healthcare settings, correctional facilities, corporations, and public forums. She's a recurring guest lecturer at Case Western Reserve University. She spoke at Stella Fest last year, Waves of Awareness, which is our overdose awareness event in Public Square. Sadly, we're not doing that this year, though. Kenyon College, the Cleveland Clinic, Catholic Medical Association of Cleveland, and recently the Grafton, you're there pretty often.
Yes.
The Grafton Correctional Institute, New Day Recovery, Parkman, First Step, Safe Harbor, Glen Bay, Ray Recovery, Cornerstone of Hope, Ohio Department of Congress, and on and on and on.
Wow.
So I think you get it. She's a big deal, and she's here as a volunteer to talk to each one of you. So please join me in welcoming Rose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am not half the big deal that all of you are. I'm really not, because you are fighting for your lives. You have more strength and courage than I'll ever have. And I am so grateful that Stella Maris lets me come in and that I get to spend time with people like you. Somehow, I can't remember names, but all of you will be forever in my heart. And that's what makes me successful in the communities. I walk in and when I talk, all your pain, all your struggle, they don't see me, but they hear it, and I can make a difference. And I would never be doing that if I didn't have that from you. And so I am so grateful, and I'm honored to be able to spend the morning with all of you.
Thank you.
You are welcome. You know, the disease of addiction is so hard on everyone, right? Those who suffer with the disease, those who love them. It's just a cluster, and so much to deal with. After I lost my son Tommy in 2016, I made it my mission to speak wherever and whenever I can, all the places that Kelly mentioned, all in hopes of educating others, because stigma is basically ignorance. People do not understand this medical disease. That's all that it is. It is not a moral failing. Why do they understand cancer, but they don't understand addiction? And if I come here and I talk to you guys and I give you coping skills and we talk about things and I make you feel good about yourself better today, but then you have to go out in society and they don't treat you right, then it makes everything harder, right? So it's vital that I'm out there. And I can tell you that the amount of stigma that existed when my son suffered is still the same now. And that breaks my heart, because there is no excuse for that. I mean, the world itself wants to judge people anyways, whether you have mental illness, addiction, whatever. Nobody wants to meet people where they're at, right? That's really a problem, because we're all human beings worthy of love, right? And if we're going to get better, we need to be accepted and treated the way we should be. If society could treat substance use disorder like they treat cancer, how different the world would be, right? My son's strength and courage and ability to fight this disease and to still continue to love others gives me that gift to keep fighting and to keep trying. And although Tommy's journey didn't end in recovery and healing, his life had purpose. Everyone who knew my son was touched by his heart, his love, his never-ending kindness, and he taught me that. As his mother, he gave me those gifts to be more compassionate, to not judge others, and above all, to understand the disease known as substance use disorder. My hope today is by sharing a story, you will be kinder to yourselves and to others, and have a better understanding of what this disease encounters. If I walked in today and all the damage that addiction has done to you, this disease, if it was apparent to me, every one of you would have broken legs, right? That's how much abuse is done to the brain with this disease, okay? But you can't see it because it's up here. So if you were all sitting here and you had broken legs, you would be different with yourself. You wouldn't say to yourself, hey, I'm going to go run, I can go take on life, I got this. If you couldn't walk, you'd have to face it, right? You'd have to humble yourself that you've got to do what you've got to do to get those legs healed and then to get them stronger so that they can carry you. And wouldn't the world be the same way? Hey, let's help this guy. Let's open the door for him. Let's be patient with him. But because your disease is in here and all the wiring and everything that is broken, because the brain is a finely managed computer. So if it's all broken and we can't see it, people see you, well, you look like their loved one. What the heck's wrong with you? You must want this. Come on, get it together. And you yourself, I bet, look in the mirror sometimes and think, what's wrong with me? I've been in rehab 6 times. I know what I need to do. If your legs were broken, you would know how to play basketball, but you would not be capable at 3 weeks, would you? Mm-hmm. But let's say 2 months in, you still think, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to do what I want to do. And you hurt yourself again. You hurt the legs again. What would you do? Go back to treatment and get help again. And you'd have to learn to be more patient with yourself. It's the same thing with this disease, but we beat ourselves up. Going into rehab is that's, I have families that'll come up to me and say, Rosie, he was doing so good. This is his 10th time. And I'll look at them and I'll say, God bless him. The 10th time, that's what it means. We keep working on ourselves. No one's perfect. This is a journey. It's a journey. The sooner you accept it, love yourself where you're at, take it a step at a time, the easier things are going to be, right? You might get tired, right? But we have to keep trying. And we all seem to forget because we can't see what's going on in our brains. And our families need to understand that. There is a process to healing and it can't be rushed, right? We know that relapses are inherent to any medical condition. So I have melanoma. If my cancer comes back, not one person looks at me and says, really, Rose? Were you not doing what you were supposed to be doing? Do you want, what's wrong with you? No, everybody meets me, hey Rose, get back into treatment. I have to humble myself, start again, do what I can. But that's how diseases work, right? So if a relapse happens, that's just part of it. That's part of your journey, part of healing that brain, part of healing those legs, right? Understanding that this disease takes time to heal is part of what you need to do. So we know that the protocol for this disease, so the protocol for my melanoma, when it comes back, I have to do this treatment, whatever. The protocol for this disease is 14 weeks in a rehab, followed by 1.5 to 2 years in a sober living, inclusive environment, supportive environment. If I would have told my son that, Mr. I'm going to do it my way, he would have told me, put it where the sun doesn't shine. I know what I need to do. I know you're all intelligent. I know you all know what you need to do. I know what I need to do too. But sometimes we want to do it our way, right? We're talking 2 years for that brain to heal. 2 years for those legs to get strong enough to carry you through your life. So if you cut yourself short, you're not going to be as strong as you should have been, right? And that brain needs that. So we have to be patient to ourselves. I know life pulls at you and you want to be with your kids, or you got to get back to work, or you can't take this anymore. But if you don't make yourself a priority and do what you need to do and give that brain that time to develop the healthy pathways and the connections that need to be fixed, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? So what we do know is that when someone starts using substances and then they stop, as soon as you stop, both the body and the brain will begin to heal. Healing begins, right? We know that after 2 weeks, the brain activity in decision-making areas of the brain has started to rebuild. That's at 14 days. Those wirings, those connections. By a month, the dopamine levels will start to stabilize, helping to restore motivation and pleasure. That's 30 days in, right? And over 3 to 6 months, your memory, your focus, and your emotional regulation will improve. This is why early recovery feels so hard. Remember, it's going to take you a month to even get a little bit of stability. The brain can heal, though. It is possible. Recovery is not, they say it's possible, but it's really biological. Your legs, go back to that leg thing. Your legs can heal. You have to be patient. You have to give it time. You have to do what you need to do. You're going to have bad days and you're going to have good days, but you're going to still keep the focus. As with any medical condition too, patients are always empowered when they have knowledge of the disease and they are given coping skills. So the first thing before I even get into Tommy's story is I want to give you some skills for brain health, what you can do. So I started researching because, like I said, I'm an older lady. I forget things. I want to keep this brain healthy, right? So I started researching. I don't know if any of you know who Dr. Daniel Amen is. He's a world-renowned neurophysicist who did all kinds of research on keeping a brain healthy. So it was for people that had substance use disorder, people that had mental health problems, people that had epilepsy, people that had Alzheimer's. He found that there were ways that we could get that brain healthy, that you can do yourselves. Yes, we need rehab and you need professional help, but you can own this. I can own this. I can make my brain as healthy as I possibly can get it. And literally, that's what we're talking about here. Your disease state affects your brain. So we need to focus on that. And that's something, it's empowering when you do something to help yourself, right? That you can control. Because you can't control a lot of outside things. So there's 4 areas that Dr. Amen talks about. The first one is, he said, you have to increase the blood flow to the brain. Well, when you think about your body, anytime you can increase the blood flow, it's going to help your heart. It's going to help everything. So everybody always says, what do you want me to do, Rose? Go to the gym? Well, yeah, I hope you go to the gym. I hope you play baseball. I hope you do things to get your body healthy and get that blood flowing so those cells can start to relive. But what's really important with addiction, and my son never really understood this, what you're doing right now, you're all sitting and you're listening, and I know it is not easy to focus when your brain is jacked up or you're tired or you're just out of detox. But while you're sitting there and listening to me, you have to focus, right? And as you focus and you listen to me, then you have to decide. You have to take it into that brain. You have to decide, she's crazy, I agree with her, I don't know. But you have to comprehend it and think about it. And then what I hope is that you do the next step, which if you're in a meeting or something like that, you start to verbalize. Because then you have to formulate thoughts, and that works the brain. Those 3 things are like doing leg lifts with a broken leg. You're exercising the brain. My son didn't want to go to meetings because he would say, I know what these people are all crazy. We're all in meetings where there's crazy people. You have to be patient. You have to feel sorry if they're off the chart. You know, I have to do it all the time. I could be in a board meeting with judges, and they start talking about people that have this disease as though it's a choice. You know, I could go ballistic. And I kind of just sit there, I wait till they're done talking, and then I stand up and I calmly say, I'm not going to continue it at this meeting until we talk about what this disease is, because it is not a choice. But I have to use control. But if I shut down and I don't go to the meeting, am I helping anyone? No. There's my chance, right? So for you, knowing to have to sit there, even if somebody's crazy and they're not like you, but using that control is doing so many leg lifts with your brain. That's why those meetings are so important. I mean, Tommy didn't want to do that, but when you think about it, it's training your brain, right? I hope that you read. I hope that you do things that just keep that brain vibrant, right? The second thing that Dr. Amen says is, obviously we're not going to use substances. So if you use cocaine, no, I don't want you using cocaine. I don't want you using anything, to be honest with you, right? Because anything that jacks up the brain is going to hurt my healthy brain. So I don't know if any of you know Dr. Nicole Labor. She's an addiction medicine doctor. Mm-hmm. She runs a few rehabs in Southern Ohio, and I went to a talk that she gave, and she said, when we got to this area, she said, I tell my patients, I don't even want to see you smoke or vape. Now, I know that's hard. I know a tremendous amount of people smoke and vape after getting through addiction. But think about it. Smoking is nicotine, which is a stimulant, not like meth, but it's a stimulant. Then when you vape, that's also a large amount, and way more than even smoking. But what does that do to that brain that's struggling, that's been damaged? It shakes it. I don't want to shake your brains. I want to take your brains and hold them and tell them I love them and they can do this. So if you do that, I ask you to at least try and cut down for the sake of your brain. It makes sense, right? If you have mental illness, and 70% of people that have this disease have concurrent mental illness, then you owe it to yourself, if you've been diagnosed with bipolar or whatever, to stay on the medications that are needed to get what you're missing in your brain, to get it to an even keel so we can face the disease of addiction. I know a lot of people don't like the side effects, but you're being ignorant if you say, I'm not taking that med, because then what you do is you end up coping some other way. You got to own it. You got to say, it doesn't define you that you're bipolar, so it doesn't define you if you're depressed. I do suggest, though, that if 6 months, so you know what I just told you about how long it takes for that brain, 6 months it's really starting. Do not automatically go on an antidepressant within those first 6 months if you're not really clinically depressed. Obviously, you're going to feel depressed. Your brain has been super stimulated by chemicals, not natural things, shaken to the core. Of course, when it's taken away from you, of course you're going to feel, whoa, like I'm really depressed. I just would suggest holding off until you get to a stable. And then if you still are clinically depressed and they feel you need medication, then I would add it, right? But those substances, the other thing is you want to put good things in your body. And I know that here at Stella Maris, they had done a study with the dietitians from about the diet, about a high protein, low sugar, a good solid based diet helps that brain too. These are all things you can control. The last two things that Dr. Amen talks about are the hardest things to do. And I do lots of talks. I don't just talk in rehabs. But even when I'm out, anybody has trouble with these last two. But I promise you that if you choose to ignore these last two, your recovery is going to be extremely difficult. That's how important it is. So the third thing that Dr. Amen says that we have to work on is called the emotional health of the brain. So there isn't one person in this room that doesn't have trauma. Your trauma is different than my trauma, but what is trauma? You didn't ask for trauma. Trauma doesn't define you, just like addiction doesn't define you, but it happens. Maybe it's childhood abuse, maybe it's sexual abuse, maybe it's abandonment. I mean, there's all kinds of trauma. So if trauma happens to you and you don't deal with it, because it's painful, right? You don't want to feel it, you want to push it down. If you don't deal with it and wrap your head around it and realize you didn't ask for it and it doesn't define you, you will push it down, and what happens? It comes back. It'll take another stressor, another trauma, and then they compound. And what trauma does to that brain is it holds it captive. It paralyzes the brain. You can't think right. Everything's so painful. And what happens? You choose a poor coping skill because it's so painful you don't want to feel. I'm not minimizing. That is real pain. That's why you have to address it. You are not superhuman beings. So let's talk about my son's trauma. So I was married for 27 years, and my ex-husband went through a midlife crisis. That's like a mental breakdown, right? And he left us. That was huge. He loved us, but emotionally, I got to get out. Here Tommy was the oldest brother of 3. He took it on personally. He thought he caused it. Mom, what's going to happen to us? That's something we can't control. That was a trauma. He thought, he didn't cause it. This was something that happened. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table saying to Tommy, we cannot control what's going on. He needs to get his help. But Tommy, we'll be fine. We got to take care of ourselves. And he was crying. And I said, Tommy. He goes, Mom, he's not coming back. I said, Tommy, you need to, we're going to be okay. You didn't cause this. You need to talk to somebody, because talking to somebody else or a professional is a lot different than talking to your mom, right? He doesn't want me to think he can't do it. I got this, Mom. It's good, but he pushed it way down. Devastated him because he had the younger brother and sister. Fast forward to when his girlfriend of 6 years, whom he loved, she broke up with him. It's a double trauma. So the first trauma that we never dealt with comes up, second trauma hits, he can't function. He's in too much pain. Everything is he's out, and what you're more apt to use, right? More apt to numb that. Let's talk about my trauma. So the worst trauma you can ever go through is the loss of a child. So after 6 long years, I lost Tommy. Okay, I had to go talk to somebody because I wanted my son back. I was so angry that the world did this to him and that he tried so hard. And I went to professional counseling for probably a year. And I would go, and sometimes I would just sit there and pound on the desk and say, I want Tommy back. And she was always the same, very good, very professional. She'd look at me and she'd say, Rose, first thing we have to do is live in reality. Reality was Tommy wasn't coming back. Second reality was we did the best we could. This was not anything I did. It was to be, and not beat myself up, right? But living in reality so that I didn't keep beating myself up. I had to learn coping skills. I had to learn that at work, when something triggered a feeling or the trauma to come back, I had to go in my car and I had to do what I had to do, listen to whatever, and get it out of my system. I did that a lot until I could handle it. But now I'll always have the trauma, but now I can handle it. Now I can look at the trauma and say, you're not going to define me. It's okay. It's okay, and I take the good of what my son gave me. But trauma has to be dealt with. I learned not to let it define me. Do you know I still meet parents that have lost children to this, and they'll start, nonprofits because they're gonna change the world, and that's how they're dealing with their grief. But they've never really dealt with the grief, and then they hit a wall. The nonprofit falls apart, or they see me, and it could be years later, and every time they see me, because they see that I am okay and I'm living and there's a peace, they fall completely apart. They start crying. Rosie, I should have done more. This is 10 years after the person. And I'm like, you're living in all that pain. What does that do to your brain? You can't do that, guys. Your brain needs all the help it can get, and it needs to know that trauma will not define it. Any questions on the trauma piece? Okay, the last is the fourth thing. Oh, and again with the emotional thing. Remember that the opposite of addiction is connection. If you let that trauma alienate you or pull you away, or the pain, addiction's going to go crazy. That's what it wants. Doesn't want you to know that you matter. Doesn't want you to know that you have people around you that care about you. Do not let it alienate you. But the last thing that Dr. Amen talks about is the spiritual health of the brain. I'm not going to stand up here and talk about being Catholic. I'm very faith-based. I love my faith. But the spiritual health of the brain is that you as an individual know that you're worthy of love. Exactly how you are. That no matter what you've done, no matter what you've been through, you were created and you were worthy of love. Period. And you have to be able to believe that. So I was at a rehab one time, and this guy, he raised his hand and he goes, hey, you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've been through. I don't think how am I supposed to know I'm worthy or love myself? And I thought to myself, this poor person doesn't even know that they matter. If I told you all right now to hold your breath, you would all breathe again. Not because you're at Stella Maris, a great place, not because I'm here. You would breathe again because your higher power, God, is not done with you. You are still have a purpose in this life. You are alive today. Tommy isn't. He has another purpose. But you are alive today and you are blessed. I don't care what anybody has to say, right? So when he said he didn't know, I said, there's only one way you can feel like you're loved. And I said, and it begins very small, but you have to get out of yourself. I said, you have to care for someone else. I said, it's an ongoing thing. It's the practice of kindness. Open the door for somebody. Maybe tonight when you go back to your room, if your roommate's having a bad day, instead of you feeling sorry for your bad day, you say, hey, how you doing today? You love someone else. And when you do that, what happens is you get more love back than what you gave, and that builds your soul so you know you're worth it, and you find that peace. Yeah, I come here and I love on you and I tell you what I think. I leave here full. I could put 50 Cent on because my son listened to it and danced the whole way home. I can't dance anymore. But you understand what I'm saying? Yes. And I open myself up, and that's how blessed I am. So I was at a rehab in Warren in the middle of a snowstorm, and if any of you know me, you know I have trouble driving. Kelly knows I have trouble driving. But if it's snowing, I would cancel because I go slow anyways. They would take me off the road. So it was supposed to be this bad snowstorm, but I really felt bad, like I got to get there because this was a new rehab. There were a lot of men there, and I wanted to go. So I went there, and the snow held off. I thought, okay, thank you, Jesus. So this was when this guy asked me, how you don't know me, how am I supposed to love? So I went out, I got all my stuff, and by the time I was done talking, my car was covered with, there was snow everywhere, 4 inches everywhere. So I go walking out, and I see my car, but my car doesn't have any snow on it. Completely cleared off, and I'm like, what the heck? And so I go out to my car, and around the corner comes this man. It's a snowstorm. He has no coat, no hat, no gloves, holes in his shoes, a T-shirt on, jeans that were beaten and had holes. He cleared off my entire car with his bare hands. There was not a speck of snow. He came over to me, and his hands were frozen solid. And he was crying, and that was like freezing on his face. And he said, Rosie, I did the best I could. I took my coat, I wrapped it around him, and I said, thank you for loving me. I said, you didn't have to do that, but you did that. I said, that was the nicest thing I've had given to me. And when I said that to him, and I said, I love you, he literally fell into my arms, and not because of me. It's because he felt my love. Like he did something, and he walked in with a smile on his face. His head has never been up the entire time I talked, or even after he cleaned my car. But when he walked into that, his head was higher, because he knew he was worthy of love. So it's a small practice, but it's something that you have to do. When I'm in communities, and I'll say to them, because they want me to teach them about addiction, I tell them, you're all diagnosed with the disease, that you could die, you could get put in jail, you may have to go back to treatment many times. Nobody understands. People stigmatize you. You've got terrible, nobody's around you. You have no help. How are you going to fight this disease? And they all look at me like, what are you talking about? But is that not what you guys have to deal with? And I'll say to them, you wouldn't be able to deal with that disease, would you, unless you knew you were worth it? Unless you knew you loved yourself enough to take the next step, even though everybody else is not helping you. You'd have to believe in yourself enough to find the energy to fight, correct? Even though you're having horrendous consequences. That's what the disease of addiction is. So remember, you have to find that inner peace. You have to find that love of yourself. Regardless of what's going on outside, it's within you. Any questions on those 4 things? Okay. I read the other day about the spiritual healing of the brain with people with substance use disorder. And it said, by peeling back the layers of hurt and despair and finding the love for oneself and others, the doors will open for recovery. Look, we need everything we can do to get better. I do everything I can with my cancer. You owe it to yourself. Do everything you can because you're worth it. and I know it can beat you down. But if you know you matter and you're worthy, won't give in to that. All right, so now I'm going to talk about Tommy's story a little bit. So Tommy came into the world on Easter Sunday. He was my firstborn son. From the time he was a little boy, his heart was bigger than himself. So I will say one thing I've learned in the last 12 years of my life dealing with him and people, I have never met someone who has the disease of addiction that isn't a huge soul. Big heart, nicest people, never met a nasty person. And I think because your souls and your hearts are open and you feel deeper, you're more susceptible to this disease because life is very painful. I tell my 2 other kids all the time, life is painful. There is no easy fix for this. And so if you feel deeper, you're more apt to want to numb that because it hurts, right? So that's not a bad thing though. Having a heart, having a soul, that's what really defines you. And so, but Tommy was like that, you know. He was an impulsive child, not afraid of anything. Best big brother, always looking out for his siblings. He worked very hard in school, but his blessing really was that he was a phenomenal athlete. He was a national soccer player by the age of 12, and he did grappling and ended up being an MMA fighter when he was in college. But I'm just curious how many of you have had concussions? Okay, so when you have a concussion, that's kind of like with drugs. It shakes the brain, right? So it's interesting to me, when Tommy had his concussions and he was like 13 or whatever, they're like, oh, he can't play soccer, 3 weeks, he's got to rest. That was years ago. If I have a concussion today, it's totally different. I'm not allowed to be on my phone. I can't have screens. 6 months of rest, because that's how finely tuned that brain is. That's what a concussion can do, right? So if you've had concussions, not that you can't recover, but I would say that's another thing that you have to be patient with, that your brain has got to recover from that, right? So we know that a man's brain is mature at 27. Females, their brains are mature at 25. We all knew that, right, ladies? Mm-hmm. But I will tell you, if you started using drugs when you were 13, it's so different than if you waited till you were 28. Why? Because the brain is moldable, it's immature, just like if you had concussions earlier on. Doesn't mean it can't get there, but you got to be patient. That's a big hurdle for people in rehab because they started early and that brain missed some developmental stages. It can be fixed. That leg can be retrained. That brain can be, and it's all in how giving your time that training and that process of letting your brain help make better decisions. Many times when I go in the sober houses, I can tell the guys are mad, or even the women. They don't want to be there. They're like, it's like, I got to be in here by 10 o'clock. I know what I need to do. I'm not saying you don't know what you need to do. The reason why you're in an environment there is structure is to help that brain focus on structure and just not letting it put itself in a weak position. Instead of fighting those things, you need to embrace that for the good of your brain. It's not a punishment. So Tommy actually, he had probably, 4 or 5 concussions, but his happened earlier on, more in the soccer because they don't wear helmets. I think it's the most ridiculous thing. But anyways, when he did the MMA, he never even got hurt, right? He went 8-0 when he became an MMA fighter. His picture was all over Akron and Cleveland. He was only 21. Way too much for my son to handle at the time. And, he graduated from college and everything. But back then, when he was fighting, I used to say, I'm a mom. And I'd be like, Tommy, I know you haven't gotten hurt because he was so good. I mean, he'd have a bout down in Nautica, and within the first round, he'd get that guy in a pretzel, I don't know, whatever. But I said, you see your nose? I said, it's going to be over here one day. And I said, I don't want to see my son like that. I know, Mom, but I don't get hurt. I got this. I have such a feeling of, when I win, and he hadn't gotten hurt. But I knew that when his dad left, Tommy, he said, Mom, he retired, and he told me he did, and he, had to get a job. He felt he needed to be there for the family. So I had no idea until his funeral. So there was all these people, and that was quite I was in a daze to begin with. But there were these men that came that were big guys, and they were in suits. And so, people the normal thing when you come to a wake, you wait in line. Well, these 3 guys, they didn't wait in line. I thought, oh, God, who's this? They walked in, came right up to me, and I was like right beside my son's coffin. And they came right up to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're not even waiting in the line, you know? And they're like, we want you to know who Tommy DeRoia was. And I'm like, oh, God, does he owe them money? I didn't know. Yeah, and I said, and they're like, he is pretty special. And I said, yes. And they said, they were from UFC, and they had flown out from California because when Tommy went 8-0, which I never knew, they came out because he was that good. Like, they wanted him to train with the best of the best at UFC, which was one of his dreams, and to become this big star. And so they said, we wrote up a contract, we sat down with him, we slid the contract to him, and he didn't even read it. He pushed it back and said, I can't sign it. And they thought, is it with the money? What, you know? And he's like, no. He said, my father is struggling. He's not with the family, and I can't leave my family. And he said, thank you, but I can't. So he gave up his dream because he loved us. But remember, when he was 8-0 and big time in his picture, what 21-year-old can handle that? And I know there were drugs. I know there were parties, there were women, there was all kinds of stuff. And he had already started coping through high school when school was difficult, smoking pot, whatever. But it was a beginning of a process, right? You know, he did get a job. He was a sales manager for Affinity Healthcare. And because of that personality and that charisma, he could do more sales in 1 month than people could do in a year. And, you know, but he had something that was deep inside. There was pain. There was that addiction, that numbing himself, right? You know, the 6 concussions from sports earlier on, his impulsivity, and my son had no fear. Now, that's great if you want to be an MMA fighter. But not so good if you have addiction, because you have no fear, right? I can do this, I got this, right? His attitude and the trauma all combined to make addiction take hold, right? And people will say, oh, it's a choice. Everything begins as a choice. If I start smoking today, and then 10 years from now I have cancer, didn't it start as a choice? Yeah, it did, but no one's yelling at me. No one's treating me like I'm less than human. This started as a choice, but it would get out of hand, right? The first sign that I had that Tommy had an issue was an early morning accident. Mind you, my son wrecked 4 cars during his bout with addiction. But he had an early morning accident. He was going up a hill coming home. He had gone to the gym because he used to train other people. And then he probably went out, but he was high. And he was coming home. And when he got to the top of the hill, somehow he lost control. And his car rolled over the hill. And it went through like a mile of like a forest. And the police told me, we really don't know how he survived. He should have hit a tree and died. I don't know either. God wasn't done with him yet. So he's at the hospital. I go there. And I have a question for you. So I go there to talk to him. Am I talking to the disease of addiction, or am I talking to my son? I'm talking to the disease of addiction. Mom, this doesn't define me. I don't know, it got out of hand. I know what I need to do. Of course he knows what he needs to do, but his brain can't do it. Right? But I was ignorant. I was a pharmacist, and I was ignorant back then. The first time something happens, you need to hit rehab hard. And you need to do it the whole process. That's your best chance. Not that you can't recover other ways, but hit it the first time. Or any time you're here, make it a priority. But so, again, what I wish I would have learned, and I'm going to tell you this because you need to know this too. I wish I would have been able to separate my son and the disease. So when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you have to see who you are, and you have to see that you have this disease. You can't do this. When this does this, you lose who you are. You are wonderful, courageous, loving people that deserve a chance at life. You've got a disease. That doesn't say you're a loser, you deserve to go to jail. You know, no, we're not talking about that. And if other people say that, that's their problem. I tell families all the time when I get the calls in the middle of the night, he took my car again, oh my God, she relapsed, blah, 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 and they're fired up. Take a deep breath. Did your daughter relapse? Did your son steal the car? Or did the disease of addiction take over once again? Not that you can accept it. That's what you need to learn to hold them accountable. Always love them, but hold them accountable. So I wish I would have known that, but I didn't. So Tommy says, I know what I need to do. So he has to go to a court-ordered rehab outpatient for a week. That shouldn't even exist. What did I just tell you the protocol of the disease was? What was 1 week going to do? Right? Okay, but that's what they sent him to. And he's like, Mom, this doesn't define me. I got this. I know what I need to do. So he goes and he checks the box. Anytime you are in any kind of treatment program, whether it's rehab or anything, and you're checking the box and you're not owning it, you are not hurting Stella Maris. He didn't hurt Laura Wood. He hurt himself. Yep. Right? Why would you just check the box when you're worth it? You're worth getting everything you can out of this program. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe Kelly has a bad day. Maybe you don't really think I'm saying anything. But you know what? You do what you do and you see the good in it. Because that's your responsibility. Because you're worth it. And make the best you can out of it. But Tommy checked off the boxes. And I didn't know back then that it takes an average of a few times in rehab to get better. Does my cancer go away just because I was treated one time? No, it's called, I'm in remission. I thank God I'm in remission. But when it comes back, I have to hit the ground running. Why? Because I'm worth it. I'm no better than anyone else, but I know that I have things to do. And so I got to own it. My kids can't own it for me. My family can't own it for me, right? But he completed the outpatient rehab and thought, it seemed like he was on track, right? But he didn't put into place the little bit that he learned, right? This is your responsibility. So I told you those 4 things that you can do for your brain. It's up to you. I could talk till I was blue in the face. It's up to you to own it, right? You can deal with your counselors here and they can say, hey, you can't be going there because that triggers that brain that's not ready to handle that. If you choose to do it, then that's you're right. You have to empower yourself, right? But, you know, he was able to keep it under wraps and still use a little bit and then get it back under control. He wasn't really owning the whole process, right? And I will tell you, back then, I would have given anything for peer support. They didn't have it back then. He had a hard time even finding sponsors. Every person here needs a peer supporter. They bill it to your insurance. It's a life coach. Hell, I want one. Who doesn't want somebody that picks you up and takes you to lunch and understands what you're going through and says, this is how you fix it? Somebody that's a friend. What did we say? The opposite of addiction is connection. Don't give me any bull. You need a peer supporter. And if that peer supporter doesn't meet what you want, get a different one. You deserve somebody that understands you. But it's another avenue, another piece of the puzzle, right? But Tommy was trying to do it on his own, and you're bound to relapse, right? The disease was a master at hiding itself, telling him, you have it, your mom's the crazy one. And it slowly takes over until life is chaos, right? I'm going to tell you a few things that as a mother I went through, not because I want you to feel sorry for me, not because I want to make you feel bad, but part of the issue with you getting better is your family and them, they're needing to get help too, right? But I think sometimes it's why they react the way they do if you knew what they go through. So there were many nights I cried myself to sleep. And my son always told me, Mom, you call it a disease, but this disease takes you around the most evil people of the world. And that killed my son. He hated when he saw women being abused, or he hated when they would beat somebody up. Nobody's going to mess with my MMA son. But when Tommy's under the influence, he could get tased, he could get beaten up, window broken, slammed to the ground. Okay? So knowing that, I would cry myself to sleep. And I remember thinking, why am I being made to watch my son die a slow and agonizing death, and I can't help him? And that's what your family sees, because only 3 things are going to happen to you guys. 1, you're going to get help, and you have to go a few times, just like my cancer. You're going to get arrested. That's a whole nother issue. I work on that on the side with drug courts and everything like that. I don't agree with that. That's a whole nother thing. But that's something you have to face, right? You can only hope and pray that these institutions would have more programs like Grafton and have a rehab within the jail. But regardless, that's a trauma, or you're going to die. So families know this. So that's all they see when things happen. And they can't, they get like this, and they lose fact of the loved one and the disease. And then they shut down, and then they pull back. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to enable. Do not use that word around me. Enabling is when I just throw money at you. Good luck. Loving you is taking you to get food, meeting you where you're at, and holding you accountable. I'll take you to get treatment. That's what love is. And every person needs love. I will say that when my son was struggling, My 2 other children wanted me to do all kinds of things because they were scared to death that he was going to die, right? But I was a single parent, and I didn't answer to anybody. I still don't answer to anybody except God. But I remember sitting them down, and I said, look, you two, because they were young. I said, your brother's in there, and maybe you don't see him. And I'm not asking you to get in the car with him when he's under the influence. But you will find time to text him once a day or once every other day, love you. And if you can't do that, you're going to write him a note and put it by his bed. Because he is your brother, and he does love you, and he's sick. And by the grace of God, you don't have this. That changed them. And I will tell you, to this day, they're grateful for that. Because when he died, can you imagine the guilt? There's no guilt. Yeah, they could have done better, but they loved him. They loved him. But anyways, so as a parent, they have to, I remember a counselor saying to me, you need to get help. And I remember looking at the counselor saying, I don't have addiction. What are you talking about? And he's like, ma'am, you need to understand. And it is so important because it beats you down to where you don't make good decisions and you can't be there for your loved ones. I know it's horrific, and I have support groups that I run, and I listen to them. But they got to, just like you have to own it, they got to own it. They got to do the best they can. Why? Because they love that person. You don't love them to death, right? So one night when I couldn't figure out why Tommy couldn't stop this. And here I was, a pharmacist. I should have understood this. There is not, in medical colleges, whether it's doctors, pharmacists, nurses, they need way more instruction on this disease. They just do. But back then I didn't really have much. But I remember researching because as a mother, I was going to save my son. And I read this every time I talk because it is so true. I found that it said, addiction affects the reward circuitry such that memories of previous experiences will, with drugs, trigger cravings and then more addictive behaviors. Then that person will do whatever to answer the cravings, but to survive. The brain circuitry that governs impulse control and judgment is altered in the brain, resulting in nonsensical pursuit of rewards such as drugs. In other words, chaos. You and I both know that when you're actively using and the disease is in full force, it is complete, utter chaos, right? When Tommy was under the influence, I would look at him and I could see my son, and I didn't understand that concept, and it broke my heart. I'm like, I know he's in there, but I don't know what the heck he's saying. And I'm embarrassed. One time he was off the walls, and remember how big he is. I smacked him across the face, like he didn't even feel it, but I was so mad. And I go, when are you going to get this? When are you going to grow up? How stupid of me. He just kind of looked at me like, you're crazy. Because the disease was in full force. But that was my own frustration. That's why I needed help, right? Many sleepless nights, waiting for the phone to ring. One of the worst nights was when he would call me and he was under the influence. And I'd pick up the phone at 2 in the morning. Remember, I'm a single parent. I got 2 other kids. I'm working as much as I can, trying to save my oldest son. And he would call me, Ma. And I could always tell that voice. And I'd be like, Tommy, where are you? Because remember what he told me, and I knew the things he had suffered. I go, where are you? Ma. And then the phone would drop. Oh, my God. I don't know, and I have hypertension too. I don't know how I didn't have a stroke. I really don't. This is what your families are going through. And I'm not saying, but that's why they're so traumatized and why they need help, right? You don't do it to them. The disease does it, right? And if they can separate it and get themselves stronger, it's much better and much more pivotal for your recovery. You know, after Tommy died, it took me 6 months to put my phone down because I always had my phone on me because I just never knew when he was going to call me or when he would need something. I watched Tommy live through 10 days of detox over and over again, sitting in showers for hours, vomiting, hallucinations, nightmares, constantly fighting the demons in his brain. Why would he do that? Because he obviously didn't want to be addicted. Somebody once said to me, you know, it's almost like he wants to kill himself because remember, he like wrecked 4 cars. And I looked at that person and I said, you know, if my son wanted to commit suicide, he would do it when he's detoxing. Yep. Because that's hell. And I'll tell you, if I had this disease, I probably wouldn't last very long. I'm a big baby. The suffering that he went through and picking up his foot and moving and fighting again, the strength and courage needed, I know that I don't have it, right? I would ask you to mark your calendars at 21 days of your sobriety. The reason being, that at 21 days is when the emotional detox kicks in. We lose so many people at that point. So at 21 days, your brain starts to wake up. You start to feel a little better, but the discontent, the despair, I want to get out of here. I got to get back to my kids. I know what I need to do. I've heard this before. I got to get out of here. 21 days, it happens. We lose so many people at that point because that's when they leave and your brain, your legs aren't ready to carry you. And then a stress, you use, get something you're not used to, and you overdose. Mark it down, 21 days. I've been in rehabs and somebody will raise their hand and say, yesterday was my 21st day and I wanted to leave, but for some reason I didn't. Talk yourself out of it if you choose, when 21 days hits. Make sure you're around people, right? We had to learn as a family that recovery is not a straight shot, right? It's up and down. You know, I wish the times that Tommy was healthy and fighting that I would have met him where he was at. And I tell families that. I remember one time talking with Tom and he said, could you just talk to me about something else other than addiction? There's so much more to me. I feel so guilty for that because I will always remember the times, the good times we had, right? I spent hours researching because I thought I was going to solve this problem. We even tried an intervention. He was using so much at that point that they said he's going to die because I wasn't one to throw him out. I just wasn't. I would meet him where he was at. Make sure he was safe, but I would always wanting him to go back to treatment. But he was using so much that he was going to die. So we had an intervention. He came to the intervention high. He wasn't hearing anything. But his option was to go to a rehab or I was going to drop him at the Salvation Army, still giving him his phone. But by God's grace, he went to the rehab. And he was there for 6 weeks, fighting the program still, doing it his way, still thinking it was. He was never able to really wrap his head around it. He was embarrassed. Like all his friends had done this. I've done so many things in my life, Mom. School was hard for me, but I graduated from college. Why can't I get this? He was embarrassed. But if you don't humble yourself to what you have to do to get that brain healthy, you're going to hit a wall. And so he stayed there. He was out there for 2 months, and then he came home and went directly to a sober living in Warren for 4 months. That was the best time that we had, that 6 months. He just couldn't wrap his head around that was nowhere near 2 years, nowhere near. After that 6 months, he came home and he relapsed. Relapse was bound to happen, right? We're not putting everything into place. And at that point, whenever a relapse happens, remember this also, you need to get back into treatment. You're not going to do it your way. When a relapse happens, the brain is yelling for help. When my cancer comes back, my body's saying, get treatment. It is not an embarrassment to go back to rehab. You're going to do it your way, you're going to struggle. I'm just telling you. That's your best hope. So when, he'd refuse, and I would realize he relapsed, and he'd be like, Mom, I got this. I know what I need to do. But he wasn't really embracing the whole thing or taking it on the way he should have. And there's no book out there for a parent on how to handle this, right? There are counselors and support groups that can help you, but everybody's journey is so different, right? But what I'm so proud of my son for, and what I'm proud of all of you, is that he never gave up. He kept trying, maybe not to the level he should have, but he never went and said, I'm going to live under a bridge and I'm just going to shoot up, or, and that's it. Never said that. He hated what it had done to him, and he kept trying. The amount of strength that takes, I'm so proud of him for that, right? Towards the end of his struggle, I could see he was very tired of fighting every single day. And we were on the couch one day watching a movie, and he looked at me and said, Mom, if only I could rewind my life 6 years. How many of us would like to rewind our lives, right? Yeah, that's not how life works. You got to keep going forward. And I said, Tommy, I don't know why this is your journey. I don't know why this is your journey. I don't know why people have to suffer, but this is life. And it is what it is, and it doesn't define you. I said, please don't give up, Tommy. And he started crying. I could tell that he was starting to get beaten down. And even in the worst times, that heart that all of you have, it always shone through. Was outside a counselor's office, and he said, hey, Mom, I know I put you through hell, and I know myself too. And he said, but if all this causes my younger brother to never, ever try a drug, then my life had a purpose. Because he loved his brother more than anything, and his sister. I really didn't know how much longer Tommy could go on. We were at a doctor's office in at UH, and they said the amounts that he had used. Now, remember, we're not constantly high, but the levels that he was using, his brain would need all those 2 years to get healthy again, right? Tommy couldn't make it very long. He just was in a spiral, right? I prayed every day that Tommy could hold on, but you and I both know addiction's 24/7. There are no breaks. It's just there. You can't escape it, right? I tell people life is hard, but fighting the disease of drug addiction is by far the hardest battle anyone will ever have to fight. My son overdosed twice and was brought back by Narcan, and I tell this story because it was probably the first real time that I felt the stigma that he felt. So in 2016, it was all over the news, like if there was a mother with a stroller and she overdosed and they gave her Narcan, they'd put it on the paper in the news, look at this mother, not in a positive way, right? Narcan was saving lives. So Tommy had been saved twice. He had overdosed. He was always by himself. It wasn't like he was hurting anybody else. He was sick. And, he would be brought back through Narcan and then be hit with a felony because he had drugs in the car. It was just like, whatever. But anyways, at my work, my last job I had, I worked at Cardinal Health. I didn't work with drugs. I worked with medical supplies. But they knew I was a pharmacist. So this woman came by my office, and it was right when this was all in the news. And she said, and they didn't know that Tommy had the problem, not because I wouldn't tell people, but I had everything I had on my plate at that time. So she came in my office and she said, hey, what do you think about those people that they give the Narcan to? They're just going to use again. When she said those people, and I'm thinking, you're talking about my son. And I sat there and I thought, so you have this dual personality, right? So I got Tommy here telling me when he was doing the MMA, you can see I'm not very athletic. He tried so hard to teach me how to do stuff because he thought somebody was going to steal my purse. Hell, I can't even handle mace. I shoot myself right in the face. So that Tommy was right up here saying, I told you, you put her in a pretzel and you tell her to say, those people are my son and good people and take it back. And then the other personality was the mom in me, that when I came home from work the week of Thanksgiving and I walked in and he said, hey mom, he met me at the door, he goes, they're not having me for Thanksgiving dinner, the extended family, because I may use. And that's when the anger was bad, and I was like, are you kidding me? And I was so mad, and he's a big guy. He picked me up, and he held me so tight, and he said, Mom, you got to feel sorry for those people that they're that ignorant. So that was this person. So this person won out. And I said, Michelle, don't you have a son? Well, yeah. And I said, well, if he was right here and he wasn't breathing and I could give him Narcan, what would you want me to do? Her face got red and she stumbled off. The irony of the situation is that same person, same son, has a cocaine addiction and concurrent mental illness, and she struggles with that. I don't wish that upon anyone. But the stigma of talking those people, okay. So in 2000, we'll go on. I don't like stigma. In April of 2016, Tommy was once again in the fight for his life. He tried to get into a detox, couldn't get anywhere, detoxed at home. He refused to go to rehab. Big mistake, right? What did I tell you? When you relapse, go right to rehab. He refused. He said, Mom, I'm going to get this out of my system. Spent 10 days suffering. And then he went back to the sober house where he had stayed, where it was a good fit. Always not good to go back to the same place. Again, the brain needs rehab. I'm sorry. I know it's not a punishment, but it needs that to settle down. So he's at the sober house, doing well, 21 days. What happens at 21 days? The emotional detox kicks in. He had gone to the gym to work out, person, places, things, bought some drugs, was off to the races. So now what do? That's another whole problem. When you're in sober living and you relapse, you can't go back because these people are working a program. But where do they go? Like, that's another problem. So anyways, they're sitting at the sober house was a great place. The owner, everybody's sitting there. They have him on a speakerphone with me. They're like, Tommy, you got to go back to rehab. They wanted to help him. But who are they talking to? Are they talking to Tommy or the disease? The disease is what I could hear it in his voice. I got this. I'm gonna go get it out of my system. I'm gonna stay with some guys that are sober, Mom. Don't worry. I love you. Click. That was my last conversation with my son. He then didn't have a peer supporter because they didn't have them back then. Both of his sponsors had overdosed and died. They had tried to help him at the house. Who's he going to call? Ghostbusters? No. He's going to call somebody he used with. His good friends had all done this. So he calls a guy he used with, which a year prior to this, Tommy had saved his life. They had gotten something with fentanyl on it, and he did CPR, called 911, saved this guy's life. This guy's in active addiction. He calls him up, and now it's off to the races. So then the phone goes dead. These are the things that I've gone through, hoping that he's going to come to my office, or they're going to call me from the hospital. So the mother of the other young man, she can't reach him, and she's divorced. I don't really know these people. She calls her ex-husband and says, hey, I can't reach Mike. Can you go check on him? So Mike had an apartment in Tremont. So they had been on a binge because Tommy would tell me once he would use something, it would spark the brain. You just use because you deserve this. You've been good for 3 weeks. Yeah. You can handle this. And off he went. So when Tommy would get anything with fentanyl on it, he always knew because it was like a black wall. So because Tommy was going to beat everything, every time he would try to stand up. And I knew it because he would fall down steps, he would hurt his ankle, because he would try to beat it. Fentanyl is what we give people to put them to sleep so we can operate on them. Do you think you're going to beat it? I don't think so. But this was Tommy. So that's what happened. They both overdosed. The young man that he's with is on a couch. Tommy comes down the steps because Tommy's going to beat this, and he falls. So now Tommy's at the bottom of the steps, the other young man's on the couch, and they're both overdosed. So his father comes over to check on him, and he unlocks the door, and there's Tommy. Tommy's still alive, but he goes up the steps, finds his son, calls a friend, and they take his son to Cleveland Clinic, and they have him at the ICU. He's seizing and everything for 36 hours, but he survives. But 36 hours later, we have a problem because we never called 911. They didn't obviously understand Narcan. So now my son has passed. So with that, I'm at least grateful that because they took him and drug him across a parking lot of stones so that when I got my son, it was all scraped up. But they put him in the passenger side of his car and took his phone and his wallet and parked him outside Tremont Elementary School. And a day later, a mailman found him. So that was evil, right? What did Tommy tell me? That it was evil. It was what it was to be. The other young man survived, but I hear stories like this all the time. This disease is the only one that has this kind of ramifications. But I will tell you, I spent 15 months at the prosecutor's office because they were able to get his phone, but I did not want this man to go to jail because his son was as sick as Tommy. And all you can hope and pray when somebody has this disease is that you get a window of opportunity where you can convince them to go back to rehab. So I didn't want, if that boy had a moment of clarity, the only person he had was his dad, as goofy as they were, right? How was I going to live with myself if they put the dad in jail and this kid needed help? He's no better than anyone else. I'm not, so I went for 15 months and oh my God, they were in my face. Look, Rose, there's no law that says that this man's going to go to jail. And I said, you look. I said, I don't want him to go to jail. I said, all I want is my time in front of the judge. And they're like, okay, well, we're just telling you. And I said, but I thought about that. If any of you would stop breathing, I can't imagine that all of us wouldn't try and help you. Like, who would not help someone who's not breathing? But that's how it was. So anyways, the trial comes. They end up having him, the dad screaming at me when I walked in the courtroom. I didn't kill your son. It was very bizarre. But they said the mom would like to talk. So when I got up there was no drug courts back then. And I had that big picture. And I walked up and I said, sir, you have to do something for me. Well, how many times I had been with my son in court because he had a DUI or something like that. And the way he was treated. And just the whole system and how beaten down he had gotten and how I just wanted my time. And so I said, you're going to have to do something for me. So he takes off his glasses and he said, yes. So back in 2016, the reason why we were losing so many people is you could go on a computer and order a brick of fentanyl from China for a couple $1,000s. And it's delivered to your house and then you could sell it to people that were selling drugs and make millions. And that's what was happening. And so I said to the judge, I said, you need to find these people, the people that the guy that owns the restaurants in Cleveland called Mr. T, that, you know, you had my son doing sting operations so he wouldn't have a felony. He was scared to death. I said, you need to find that person and put them away because they don't have the disease. They are evil. They're killing people. They want money. They're using people. And I said, but the next time somebody like my son comes in front of you, who is only hurting himself when he's arrested, or even a low-level dealer that is sick as my son and is just trying to survive, and they're both using, they need to be sentenced to help and to rehab. Because when you sentence them to jail and punishment without services, you are literally throwing them away. That's what must be done. So then I sat down, and then he did sentence, the guy ended up having to go to county jail for a couple months, which just caused me to pray even more those months because I felt terrible if his son needed somebody. And then, so afterwards, the judge said, Rose, stand up. And I'm like, okay, well, do I go orange or black and white? So I stood up, and he said, I want you to know something. I heard what you said, and I tried to do that. He was kind of smug, and he said, and 2 months later, that person's in front of me again. And so many times my son speaks, not even me, just comes out. And I said, sir, well, that's where your understanding, your compassion, your education must come into play. This is a chronic, relapsing disease of the brain. And if that person's in front of you every 2 months, each time, they deserve the same treatment, and they deserve help. And I sat down. He said, thank you. Did it work? I don't know, but I felt better. I felt like at least I got to say something because so many times in court you can't say anything, right? You have to be respectful. And I am respectful of everyone. But I don't like when people are smug or act like they're better than all of us because no one is that, right? So that was the worst part of my son's death. But I'm also going to share with you the greatest miracle of my life. And I share it with you because I talked to you about loving yourself and feeling love and letting yourself know that. Miracles are acts of love. So if your miracle was somebody gave you Narcan, or your buddy helped you, or whatever, you need to embrace that and realize that that was a blessing. And you need to share it to give other people hope. That's what it is to love and to give love and to receive love. So the night that Tommy died, my phone was dead. His phone was dead. I couldn't reach him. I was sick to my stomach. I knew the 3 things that could happen. It was a Friday night. Everybody had gone on with their lives, but I was sitting in an office by myself in the dark. Next to me was a warehouse that ran 24/7, and Tommy had come there before, would ring the bell, the guys would bring him into the office. So that was my hope and prayer, that that would happen. So as I'm sitting there and I'm praying, and please keep him safe, I hear my son's voice. When I hear my son's voice, I'm like, hello? And he's like, Mom, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm crazy. So then I keep praying, and then just like he would when I was making him dinner before he'd have one of his MMA bouts, and he'd be across the house, he would get louder, and I hear, Ma, I'm okay. I'm like, what? I got up from my desk. I thought maybe somebody brought him in from the warehouse. I went out into this real dark room, and all I saw was his face, but it was as big as those doors. And it was dark, and all around him, and I'm nobody. But anybody that's ever had a vision like that, they'll say you can't describe it because it's love itself. It's beauty, it's caring, it's just joy. And that's all that was around him, just his face. And I saw him, and he waited until our eyes met, and he smiled like that. And he said, Mom, I'm okay. And I screamed, and I fell to my knees, and everything went away. And I realized, oh my God, he must be in heaven. And I thanked God. And I realized I hadn't seen that face for 6 years because that's what addiction had done to him. But he was whole again. Yeah. I got in my car. I drove home the entire time, thanking God and praying. And the police came 3 hours later and said, your son had passed. And I said, I know he had. That was a miracle that I could see my son. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many people that have lost children to this that just want to hear the story another time. What did he look like? What did he, people don't even get dreams sometimes. I know there's a God. I know he loves me. I know he loves you. I know he pushes me to do things so you know you're loved. And Tommy was loved. And I swear to God, he is an angel for every person that suffers with this disease that I talk to. Because people will say, you know, Rosie, sometimes when you're talking, you can feel his presence. Not me, it's him. But that is by far the greatest miracle of my life. I miss him every day, but this is life, and it's not my will. It's what God had planned, right? I still have his love and his spirit. I can't stand when people come up and rub my back and say, sorry. Like, I don't know why they do that to me. Don't do that. Like, Tommy's still alive. He's in my heart. He's my, and I love him. Don't feel sorry for me. I feel sorry for you that you don't believe in it, you know? But how many times you want to get frustrated, and I had to give this up, that if you all had cancer, there'd be fundraisers. People would be coming around. There'd always be a bed. People wouldn't judge you, right? I had to let that go, right? Do you know that people said to me after he died, it finally has stopped. But for years I got, all he ever needed was willpower. Mingya, I almost went crazy when that would happen. Willpower? You can't, if your brain is damaged, there's no amount of willpower that's going to change that or make it different. You all have so much willpower, you're trying to live. You're facing it. You all have more willpower than these people can even imagine, right? I commend each and every one of you for being here and fighting a disease and getting treatment, because recovery, as we talked about, is a long process, a day-to-day struggle, right? Everyone said, oh, Rosie, Tommy was a complicated case. Yeah, he was. But I'm forever grateful to every person in rehab that was his friend, every counselor that helped him, every police officer that didn't treat him like poop, and every, person in rehab that supported him and met him where he was at. Because no one chooses to be addicted. And addiction does not define you unless, like I said, you let it, right? Addiction means you have a disease that holds that brain captive, something that's stronger than you at times. And you need to understand and face it and give yourself the proper length of treatment. And people need to give you love and support. I pray that the stigma of addiction will eventually end and those suffering will get the treatment they need. That each one of us here will be kinder to yourselves and to others and love unconditionally as Tommy did every day of his life. Because at the end of the day, all you can know is that you did your best. Tomorrow is not promised. I could leave here and be killed in a car accident. Every minute is your present, right? I often say, yesterday is gone, today is your gift, tomorrow is only a hope. Each day I'm grateful for my son's love and spirit, and I'm humbled by what I face, that he's not coming back and that it's lonely. But knowing what is important and staying in that present moment fuels my spirit so that I can function and be purposeful, right? I use every opportunity to be kind and to love, mainly because that's how Tommy lived his life. I only have today, but I am not going to lie. As a mother, when I look out here, I see him in all your faces. And as a mother, I would give anything to hold him, to tell him I love him, to say, don't you give up. You matter. You're worth it. You're alive today, and there is hope. Don't give me anything. There is hope. Your life is a gift. What you do with it is your gift back to God and the world. Every one of us falls down, and it takes everything we have to take that next step. But if you could just reach your hand out when you're taking that next step and help somebody else, your step's going to get stronger. Why do you think so many people in recovery are back? They're helping. They're counselors because they're helping others to empower themselves, because that's true gifts of love and sense of purpose, right? And if you help someone else, you get stronger, right? Tommy survived 6 long years because he knew he was loved here and from above. And he carried with him a comfort cross, which I have for each one of you. But before we do that, remember when I talked about the spiritual healing? I want to do an exercise, and it's up to you to do it or not. But when Tommy died, the last text he sent me was a quote of Mother Teresa's that said, if you judge someone, you have no time to love them. He loved Mother Teresa. If you know anything about her, she was the saint that took care of the throwaways of society in India. Those are the drug addicted, homeless. They were in the gutters and covered with maggots. And they were going to die. But because she felt every person deserved dignity and love, she'd pick them up and take them to her convent and clean them off. They still would die, but they died knowing they were loved. And a reporter from the United States was like, why do you do this? These people are going to die anyways. And she looked at him and she said, your country has more poverty than anywhere. Mm-hmm. And he thought that she meant that people were living under, that had no money. She said, no. The poverty in your country is the poverty of souls. She goes, I could be feeding an AIDS patient. I could be talking to a police officer. I could be meeting with a senator. I could be helping a homeless person. It doesn't matter. Every person I meet doesn't feel like they're worthy or that they matter or that they're worthy of any kind of love. That is your tragedy. So she felt that the way that we give love and feel love is by expressing it, okay? So at my son's funeral, we did this, and every time I talk, I do it because it is so empowering. And when we go back to what I talked about, the spiritual health of your brain, that's knowing you're loved and giving love, okay? I know people have, faces up, they put up boundaries, but I'm going to challenge you to pull back a little bit and to open yourself up, because you've got to do that. If you don't feel comfortable, try and work on it. But what we did at his funeral was we're going to do it here. So hugging reduces stress, and physical touch can heal things that words can't, right? Our souls alone desire 13 times a day to be affirmed and hugged. 13 times a day, that's what goes through your mind. If I hugged you for 20 seconds, and then they took us away and they scanned our brains, there would be a rise in endorphins, feel-good hormones. You are lacking that because your hormones have been replaced with chemically induced highs. So we got to do everything we can to get that brain functioning, right? Because you're worth it and you deserve it. We got to get it back. So when you hug someone, you are raising those endorphins. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, and you're going to do this, and then you can sit back down in case anybody wants to talk or anything, and then you can come down and get your crosses. But I want you to stand up, and I want you to hug the person next to you. Not for you, but more for that person. You sit down. You don't have to get up. I'll come over. God bless you, honey. I'm getting a big hug from you at the end.
I appreciate that. It's beautiful.
No,
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
You're welcome. I'm going to hug you all. Don't worry. So go ahead and take her. Okay. Good luck at the game. Thank you for staying. So if there is anything that you would want to say, because remember when I talked about the emotional part of your brain and the listening part, the blood flow, I wanted you to listen, I wanted you to comprehend, and then if you wanted to share, that would be another leg lift for your damaged brain. If there is anything anyone would like to say, now is your time to share it. And then when that is all done, you please come up. I have crosses for each one of you, and Stephanie, Tommy's aunt, has cookies.
Hi, Auntie.
Yeah. Okay. So does anyone have anything they want to say? Yes, dear.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I find that one of the biggest defeating. I've been to rehab like
Who are you?
Who cares? I'm
Jake, who are you?
Hi, I'm Jake.
Okay.
Yeah. But like, one of the largest. I've been to rehab. I don't even know how many times at this point, and one of the largest downfalls of myself is like this not loving myself, right? And when I look at someone else that's a drug addict, I know that there's stigma, and I don't see that, right? But when it comes to myself and the way that I've been treated because of it,
Yes.
it's just a thing that we don't talk about a lot.
Right.
And there's a lot of reinforcement of it. I will just plainly say that. It's not like a structured thing. It's not a Stella Maris thing. It's not an AA thing. It's just we're taught that we're pieces of trash. And like, it becomes part of the structure of how I think about myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can intellectually sit here right now and know that I'm worthy of love and worthy to speak my mind and that I'm useful in the society and I'm useful here. But there's artifacts that are left behind that like,
You have to work on that.
yes, I have been for a long time in therapy and all that. But it is a thing that is constantly occurring and universal, and we call ourselves that. I see it all the time. So it's just really refreshing to have a person who knows what they're talking about. And if we're calling this a disease, you know what I mean? Which it is. I've seen the brain scans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Why am I doing that to myself? So
Right.
it's just really nice to be reinforced in that way.
And one thing I read when I was getting ready for this talk was when something is said over and over again, the brain begins to believe it. So every day, if you have to look in the mirror and say, I am worth it. I am worthy of love. I deserve a life. Say it until you believe it, right? Because you are. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. Yes, dear.
I'm Freddie 710.
I like the way you said we can restore our brain and bring out the inner stress in us. Just express ourselves to people so we can open up and be somebody. And it's never over with, it's never too late to find help.
Right, never too late. And you're here today, which is a blessing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi guys, I'm also Jacob. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. I thought your story was awesome.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did. I think it's helpful to a lot of people, especially your take on it. And I love that you are so passionate about it, but you don't allow it to look at others negatively. 'Cause
No,
a lot of
I
people don't
don't.
understand.
That would be the ultimate tragedy if I let Tommy's death make me be angry, or even with society. I mean, I'm humbled because they're so ignorant, but I don't, the anger had to leave, because anger doesn't help anyone. It doesn't, it just drains you, you know? Anyone else? Oh, yes, dear.
Clinton can't talk. He said thank you for coming and much love.
You are welcome. You are
He
welcome.
wants a hug too.
Well, at the end, you can all come down and give me a hug. Just
Just a
wait.
minute.
Go ahead.
Mike 723.
Wait, I can't hear this guy. Go ahead.
Mike 723. Yeah, thanks for coming out, and especially thanks for fighting on our behalf.
You are welcome. And you know, one thing I forgot to say, I did a podcast, your family, your recovery is pivotal to how much people around you understand, right? And unfortunately, I can't have the families here right now, but I did a podcast with a couple other professionals. One guy runs Applegate Recovery. He's also the medical director at Wayne County Jail. And a woman who runs the emergency room. But it's a 2.5-hour podcast about addiction, about what's going on with you, and how you need to be met where you're at and loved. And I know some rehabs, before the families can even see their loved ones, they have to watch it. So please take the card and give it to your families. It will help that they understand better and can support you the way they need to. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, dear.
Dre 728.
Very good.
I just was curious, what's the name of your podcast?
It's under Chronic Curiosity, and you can take one of these. It's written right here, so you won't forget. And you can Google it. It's episode number 24.
I want to thank you for your speech today.
You're
I
welcome.
think it really touched everybody's souls.
Good.
And
And
I'm not at day 21 yet, but you made me emotional.
you remember day 21, because I want to make sure you make it through and I see you again.
God bless
Because
you.
you're worth it.
For sure.
Frank? Yes. It's okay.
My name is Frank, I'm just an alcoholic.
Hey, Frank.
Love you, Frank.
Ooh, it feels good, but it's like.
It's okay.
I embrace this, because this has changed for me. I'm not comfortable doing this, so force myself to be uncomfortable. Here's the thing, Lily. Thank you from bottom of my heart.
You're welcome. You
We
are
had you with
welcome.
the key speaker for the clan bake.
Oh, yeah.
I was down at the corner, and we were doing these mics to keep the people coming in flow. We'd recognize the car, tell them where to park. We were saying, can I just do that about talking about recovery? But here's the thing, your key speaker thing that I carry with me from the minute I heard you say it, and it was weird because God had shut down all the noises, the concerts, the comedy shop, and everything just went to quiet. And you had spoke about that 2 years of sober living, how important it was from the time getting into detox to treatment. So one of the times said it's a higher success rate and life becomes much more enriched with the sobriety. I carried that with me, and I've shared that many times, but your heart's big and beautiful.
Thank you so much.
No,
So I just
no.
want to point out that the Tommy DeRoia Success Foundation is the presenting sponsor of Stella Fest. Does everybody know what Stella Fest is?
I ate 112 clams.
So it's our annual clam bake. It's a nod to our history. It's September 20th. We do it on campus. It's our biggest fundraising event. I hope that there'll be opportunities for you to help volunteer, with us. But we have Katney's Classic does the clam bake. We have live music. So Carol Negus, our director of nursing, many of you know that she's she's the front singer in a band that, performs all over Cleveland. We have dunk tanks, we've got golf, we've got, auction items, there's all kinds of fun things, so.
I just genuinely want to say from the bottom of my heart, you ladies are doing what I'm going to thank for. Thank you for what he said before.
Thank you, and thank you, and good luck.
I'm Sam and I'm an addict.
Hey, Sam.
I've seen you a few times and I still have the cross and the prayer sitting right next to my bed actually. And you just inspired me a lot. And the story just, it hits me from the bottom of my heart. And I just appreciate you a lot and I appreciate you for coming.
And I appreciate you for keep trying.
God
You know,
bless
and
you.
those crosses, for keeping it, they fit in the palm of your hand, and no matter
Yeah.
what bad of a day you're having or what people say about you, you can look at that cross and you're worth this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helped my son. So, and know that Tommy's giving me these crosses.
God bless you.
All right.